Welcome. It's a delight to have your company here today. The focus of the masterclass is Permaculture, Eco-humanitarianism. And so I'm going to, with you, explore a series of the impetus, why this work is so important, and then also share with you many of the different examples that we've been working on over the last few years with our partners in East Africa and some other parts of the world too. So let's just jump right into it. My name's Morag Gamble. I'm from the Permaculture Education Institute. I also run a permaculture education charity called the Ethos Foundation, and are now working also as an East African hub for permaculture for refugees. So this topic tonight is all about the kind of work that we can do in the world to support both an ecological restoration and one that is focused on the well-being of people too. Before I go on, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm meeting with you today, which is the land of the Gubbi Gubbi people, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to acknowledge too that this land was never ceded. If you know the land on which you're seated today, I encourage you to pop it into the chat. So I also want to let you know that this session is being recorded. So that means that there's some of you who are here now, and I encourage you to be diving in on the chat, introducing yourself, where you're from, the kind of work that you're doing, and to explore the ideas together with us here. If you're watching this as a recording, I encourage you to pop your comments down below where you can see a space for that and questions. And so we can continue to engage with this topic as we move through both here and later on. So welcome, and I'm so glad that you're here. This topic is a topic that is really dear to my heart, and I think it is of absolute critical importance that we pay attention to it. So what is eco-humanitarianism? Well, essentially, I would kind of think that this is what permaculture is all about. It's about focusing on how we can work towards ecosystem well-being and the well-being of people and all life. As we know, humanitarianism is typically connected with thinking about a focus on human well-being and helping to protect vulnerable communities. What we're looking at here is really trying to bring the conversation together to say that, well, actually, we can't focus just on the people unless we're focusing on the planet too. And we can't just focus on the planet without focusing on the people. It's bringing these things together. And it's also a deep recognition of the fact that most of the humanitarian crises are a result of the fact that we are diminishing the capacity of Earth to support people and are distributing the access to resources in an unfair way. And all of these things contribute to many people being displaced. Did you know that 1 in 95 people on Earth have fled their home? This means that 1 in 95 people are either refugees or internally displaced people. This is an enormous number, and it's growing rapidly. This means that there's about one person every 2 seconds who is being displaced from their home, from their community, from their land, from their farm, from their culture, from their heritage. It's an enormous disaster that is happening around the world. And interestingly too, and I'm not sure whether this is well known, is that 86% of the refugees are actually being hosted in the majority world. You know, we often hear about the conversations of refugees seeking refuge in places like Australia and Denmark and the United States. But actually most people who are refugees are either refugees in their own country or they're refugees hosted by neighbouring countries. So already countries that are stretched in terms of their resources and access to clean water and food and livelihood, and they're supporting now the flood of refugees that's coming out of many countries. Another distressing fact is that half of the global refugees are under 18 years old. So most of the people who we're working with in eco-humanitarian work are youth. So this also brings forward a really important focus that we need to look at. So I just wanted to share with you this graph that is a recent graph that shows what's happening with refugees and displaced people. So what you can see since 2010, there has been a marked increase in the number of people who have been forcibly displaced. And this is through conflict and violence. But the thing that we're not reading in here is like, why is that violence happening? And that is also, as I said right at the beginning, it's got to do too with the tightening on resources and the distribution of resources, and also things like, people accessing resources for technologies. And so, some of the poorest countries in the world are actually the richest in resources. And the conflict that's happening is because of the poverty that is being caused by the way in which that extractive industry is taking place. And it's a neo-colonialism, and we cannot turn a blind eye to this. It's what is happening around the world and is continuing to happen at a growing rate. And climate change is a threat multiplier. What we're seeing now, and the UN figures too, are saying that 20 million people a year are having to leave their homes because of extreme weather. 20 million people a year. So we know too that climate change is contributing to species extinction at a rapid rate. And the multiplier effect that I was talking about in the last slide is really about this, the fact that the more that we see climate change accelerating, the more we're seeing extremes, floods, droughts, wildfires, ocean acidification, biodiversity loss, and just generally extreme weather. And this is all having effect on communities that are already stretched in terms of their resilience and their access to resources. And it's also contributing to things that are happening, say, in Australia and the United States. We are really facing a very challenging time. And so our focus on caring for people, caring for the planet, is of utmost importance. And this is from the Global Footprint Network. So I often talk about this, how if everyone lived like a typical Australian, we would need 4 Earths. This is just a simple little graph. This is some of this has just come out in the 2021 reports talking about what's going on at a global level. And so basically, you can see the green line there. This is the biocapacity. So it's showing how the biocapacity of the Earth is diminishing as our populations are increasing and our extraction of resources increasing and our waste and consumption is increasing. And then at the same time, what's happening is the ecological footprint of people is also going up as we consume more. And so what we're seeing here is a widening gap between what the Earth can support and what we are taking from the planet, or the impact we're having. So this is just speeding up the process of the Earth's capacity diminishing. And what we can see here is way back, sort of 1970-ish, is when we crossed that point of when the Earth was able to support in abundance the amount of people in the way that people are living on this planet. So things really do need to change. And the Overshoot Day, just following on from that slide as well, in 2021's Overshoot Day, it's not really an improvement, even though we had last year as a slowdown year. Australia, if you look, you go around the circle. So what this is showing is you can see at what point in time did we overshoot the budget of the Earth to support us. In Australia, it was March 2022, March 22nd. Globally, it's around about July 27th. So everything that happens after July 27, which is coming up in not too far. So what happens after July 27 is actually eating into future generations, into the Earth's ecological systems and the basis of life that supports life. So this needs to change. I really like the way that Kate Raworth, the Oxford the renegade economist, describes the way in which we need to conceptualize how we can move forward. She talks about this from a donut economic perspective. So essentially what this is on the inside of the donut is the hole. If we fall into the hole and we don't meet these social needs, these foundations for social well-being, food, water, energy, housing, all of these things, which are actually what she's relating to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, the goals that have been set as the Agenda 2030 to leave no one behind. If we fall into the hole, we're creating poverty and despair, and also further ecological destruction from people just sort of chopping away at it. If, however, we have this social foundation, but yet we just continue to develop and grow without respect for the ecological ceiling, the planetary bound, then we're going to be continuing to erode the capacity of Earth to support us. So there's this sweet spot here. And I just wanted to point out too that these planetary boundaries have been described by the Stockholm University. So this diagram here is a really simple way to combine a lot of very deep thinking and a lot of research. And what we need to find is this safe and just space that humanity can live within the planetary boundaries, but with the social foundation that has well-being for people and the planet in mind. And it's this space here, this safe and just space for humanity, that I really think permaculture gives us the capacity to design for this space. So permaculture is essentially about designing for healthy human habitats that are meeting the needs but not destroying the Earth's capacity to survive and to thrive. It's also about designing for resilience of humans, about regenerating the ecosystems that have been disrupted. So it's really, if you want one phrase, I often use this, that it's one planet design, or you could call it life-centered design. And in the context of today's talk, it's really about eco-humanitarianism, that we are actually in the process of living and thinking and designing our lives in a way that is caring for people and the planet. And that's what the ethics of permaculture are about. Permaculture is deeply based on these ethics. So caring for the earth, caring for people, and fair share. Now, I really think that the eco-humanitarian approach is very much bringing the fair share to the fore as a way of helping us to do the people care and earth care. Because unless we have the fair share, we're not actually going to get there. If we're only doing it for our own backyard and for down the street, that's really great. But unless we think about the planetary whole and caring for all life, then I think we're only ever going to be doing fragments. So we can do that, but with a concept of the whole, or as we're doing it in one spot, be contributing to how it can move forward somewhere else. So the focus on permaculture for refugees that I want to describe to you now is something that I've been working with for a number of years now. And this is something that Rosemary Morrow, who's recently received an Order of Australia Medal for the work that she's done with permaculture, and particularly in refugees and with displaced people, and what she calls like edge communities. And what she talks about is that it's really important to have permaculture, like a whole systems approach of permaculture, even if you're living in a camp, because it helps you to improve where you are, so you have access to the resources and knowledge to have more resilience. It gives you the place to build in a new place if you happen to get relocated, or also gives you the capacity to build back better if you get to go home back into a community that might have been ravaged by war and start to find a new way forward. So from all of these different perspectives, wherever you are, actually starting now by building permaculture skills is absolutely critical. And it also helps to build this sense of respect, resilience, restoration, and regeneration. And this is essentially too connected to what is the United Nations Decade on Ecosystems Restoration, which just started. So essentially what the UN is saying too is that we have 10 years to transform our world. There is the Agenda 2030, which is being called the Great Reset. This Agenda 2030 began 5 years ago and is where the Sustainable Development Goals were described. And I think I just want to put a caveat there on the Sustainable Development Goals. Often we see them talked about as just like, well, we're meeting this goal or this goal. Unless we're meeting all of them, we're not actually doing it. It has to be done as a whole systems approach. Otherwise, again, it's just a piecemeal, tick the box type of approach. We need to have a complete rethink of what we're doing. And as this is talking about, a great reset. And so the definition that's actually put forward by the Agenda 2030, I think, is kind of a similar goal to permaculture when you just see it this way. So what they say is we're determined to take the bold and transformative steps which are urgently needed to shift the world into a more sustainable and resilient path. I mean, essentially, that's what permaculture is about, and it's what we need to focus on with the eco-humanitarianism. And I just wanted to show you the connection between the permaculture ethics and these sustainable development goals. So there's 17 core goals, and often you see them as a box in a little chart like this. I like to reconceptualize them in thinking about them as the kind of goals that relate to the biosphere. So we need to care for the earth. So the earth is the foundation, and once we have that too, then we can focus on caring for people and the economic system that supports that, and then the collaboration and partnerships which draw that together. But we can't just do one at a time. Even though we have these layers of the cake in this sort of diagram here, we need to focus on all simultaneously. As we saw before, this idea that there's 10 years really to turn this around, to be able to keep the planet under 1.5 degrees warming and really try and stem the degradation that's happening because of climate change and the forceful movement of people across the world. One of the things that's really struck me recently in the work that we've been doing with refugees is this description of permaculture as being one of the most successful peace-building projects they've ever been involved in, because it involves people working together, it involves people reimagining together, it involves people sharing resources to move together forward. It's not just about having talks to overcome issues, it's actually getting out and doing things together. And in that doing together and the restoring together, something shifts. And so I think this is an enormously powerful message to hear, to really hear. I was also recently working with Indigenous communities up in the rainforest in far north Queensland, and someone up there said, we have 2 of these and 1 of these, and we should really use them in that ratio. And so listening and hearing what it is, the feedback that we're getting from the work that's happening with permaculture in refugee communities is such a learning path. And I think it's opening my mind completely to new ways forward with permaculture. So my work with permaculture and with refugees started really just a few years ago. I've been working in permaculture for, I don't really like to say, but well over a quarter of a century, and been working in all around the world on 6 continents. But my work with refugees and with communities in East Africa began more recently. And it's also been involving my entire family. So I took my young children to work with me in a few years ago, and they all together achieved their permaculture design certificates with other young people taught by local teachers. So teachers from Uganda, Kenya, Liberia. And that was a transformative time, and particularly, I think, for my children as well. And they're now stepping up as leaders within this movement too, as you'll see describing here. But I want to start with describing a number of different projects just to try and help paint the picture. Like, what does this all mean? Like, I hear you saying that. I hear that it's important. I hear the facts and figures and it's disastrous, but what does permaculture actually look like when we take it to these communities? So I want to try and help explain some of that. So beginning with Kakuma in Kenya, which is a refugee settlement in the far northwest of Kenya. And one of the women who actually we were able to sponsor to come to do this course, the one that I just mentioned, this is Sakina. And Sakina and I talk just about every day, and we have ever since then, to help support her to work as a Permayouth teacher in her communities in Kakuma and also Calabaye, which is a neighbouring refugee settlement. So when she went back, she started working with lots of young children and had a permaculture kindy she was helping to start. And then when she saw some of the work that Maya and other young people were doing here, she thought, that's it. I need to be working at the youth level. as I mentioned, half of the world's refugees are youth. And if we're starting to look at how we can move forward, it needs to be with the youth. So since we began working on the Permayouth programs, Sakina has trained hundreds and hundreds of Permayouth graduates. And so each of these young people get a chance to have access to tools, to information. They get their certificates. They are part of a community garden. They work together to create local enterprises. They have a space where they can grow in the community garden, as well as get the resources to grow gardens in and around their home. So it's firstly addressing food. It's secondly addressing a livelihood, also creating a safe space and a community of support around doing this work and learning together. So communities of practice. And even today, I woke up this morning and this was the latest group of young people who have just graduated, and they're from all different nations that have been brought together in these refugee settlements. So different religions, different backgrounds, different countries, but they're coming together and in learning together in this way, overcoming many of the different challenges that they find in the camp. So this is a really exciting moment, another celebration. Actually today there's 43 new graduates. There's a couple of groups that are being trained all simultaneously. And that's Sakina on the left there, and proud mama of another group that has just graduated. And so a key part of this too in working through the Permaculture Design Certificate course, she's working to empower young women in particular. I mean everyone, but particularly young women, because she sees them as central as supporting particularly young children in working at building local economic systems, and really the ones who get most of the food systems happening and get the food to market, the local food to market. And what we're seeing too is that a new young faces in permaculture. So these young children are some of the leaders that are teaching other people, other kids in and around the community, and helping each other to grow food and to support their families in accessing the resources that they need. Many of them are orphans themselves and are cared for by foster parents and families that are just really struggling. The key thing about this that we need to understand is that food is medicine. It is so difficult to access medicines in camps like this. One, they're either not accessible, or two, they're really expensive and out of reach. And most of the rations that people have access to in the refugee camps are mostly just dry foods, things like maize and beans, oil, sugar, and there's no fresh food. So whatever they're growing in these gardens and in their little home gardens, sack gardens, tiny gardens around their homes, is the fresh food that they're going to get, which is going to help to nourish them, nourish their bodies, nourish their mind, and help them to be able to grow up stronger and healthier and to keep healthy in the face of all the challenges that they'll encounter. And so what they're doing is they're trying to turn this desert space into gardens, just a little bit by little bit. So they begin by trying to rehydrate the landscape, and they bring organic matter in. They find things to fence it off to stop the goats and the cows coming in and eating their materials. We've actually been able, through the support of many of you actually who are listening, to support a bigger fenced area so that they can enlarge this space of the community garden. And you can see behind some of the mud bricks being formed there to build a store for the tools. So each child gets a set of tools, watering cans and tools to dig, and also some seeds that they can grow in their plots and also in their gardens at home. And what we're finding then is, after all these different groups, we need more mentors for the young people. So this was the next program that Sakina started up, which was actually teaching the parents who were coming to her and saying, "We love what you're doing with our children, but what about us? We want this knowledge as well, and we want to be able to support teaching more young people, because we see how important this is, not just for the growing food, but for their education." Because during lockdown, particularly during COVID in the camps, all the schools were closed. this was actually a way that the children were able to continue to learn and go to school and be doing something productive. So they were learning eco-literacy and resilience skills and permaculture design skills and micro-enterprise skills, lots of really valuable life skills. So they're really happy also to be able to get access to tools to be able to continue their gardening. Now, a really exciting evolution of this program of the Permayouth is the Permayouth Ambassador Crew. So this is a music program that has emerged out of I'll just go back to the previous picture. You can see the young man in the middle there. That's Somali with a smile at the bottom. You can see him leaning over at the top there. So here's kind of like the leader of this group. He's a songwriter and he's a filmmaker. So what he's done is he said, look, I love permaculture, and we all do. We see how important it is, but we want to see it spread further and faster. And the way that we know that this is going to happen in the camps is if we actually do it through music. And we love music and it makes us feel happy. So the Permayouth Ambassador Crew started by writing a new song for each of the Permayouth festivals that my daughter was hosting with the local Permayouth crew here. And the Permayouth festivals include, have included people like David Holmgren, and we've had a whole lot of different people come and join them. But each time there's someone who shares music, someone who shares poetry, someone who shares a tour as well. And it's a wonderful global connection of young people. But this dedication to make a new song for each festival has made their music visible and what they're doing visible. So much so now that they've actually received funding to build a music studio and to support more young people to make music and actually inspire a global Permayouth music program. And this is absolutely phenomenal. So what I want to do now is actually share with you the very first song that started this whole music program with the Permayouth from Kakuma Refugee Settlement.
See the classic is 5 Legend Factory Maker. Present Permaculture. Located in Kenya, Kakuma Refugees Camp.
Shackness Production.
Morag Gamble. God bless you wherever you are. Amasakina, Kiriba. You are the best in this. Silabi. Sparrow. David. Sound Director.
Yep. Asante kwenu vijana Permaculture. Community inafaidi nguvu zenu. Tafadhali msije kutuacha. Tunahitaji umoja wenu. Permaculture mmetuletea. Tuna cabbage, kuna tomato, matembele, pia sombe, udongo safi, unaona wili. Tunakula vyakula bora, udongo safi, unaona wili. Tunakula vyakula bora kupitia Permaculture. Tuna mama Sakina, tuna Morag Gamble, tuna mama Sakina. Asante sana kusupport Permaculture.
Permaculture, we thank you. Permaculture, God bless you. Permaculture, we thank you. Permaculture, God bless you. We give you a special thanks to you, Morag Gamble, for your support, without forgetting Sakina Kiriba for implementing Permayouth in Kakuma Refugees Camp.
Permaculture, we work with culture. Morag, she is our teacher. Every day, we need the future. We say thanks for Permaculture. Chakula bora tunakula kila siku. Tunapata afya nzuri huku. Spinach lenga, sio kuku. Tunakula mchana na usiku. Bado mwanzo, ina uwezo. Itangazo, sio vikwazo. Tunafaidi cause Permaculture. Tunapata kivuno jema. Tunatumia mbolea za asili na kujipatia mavuno mema. Tunatumia pia na akili na ukweli inajenga mwili. Mboga zote, chakula chote, tunakula tukiwa wote kupitia Permaculture. Tuna mama Sakina.
Permaculture, we thank you. Permaculture, God bless you. Permaculture, we thank you. Permaculture, God bless you.
Chakula sio ngori, tuna tunakula kila alfajiri. Permaculture kweli ni hatari. Kila day tunashukuru, tunasay ina uhuru. No kupoe permaculture ya faulu. Tupendane, tupatane, tusiuwale permaculture number 1.
Permaculture ndana kuna chemical, ni chakula bora kwa jamii. Sisi wote lazima tukubali, wezi pata dalili ya kemikali. Shukurani kwa Mama Sakina kutupatia elimu ya permaculture. Tunatumia mbolea za asili, tunapanda mazao mbalimbali.
Permaculture, we thank you. Permaculture, God bless you. Permaculture, we thank you. Permaculture.
I really hope you enjoyed that music. It's just phenomenal what they're doing, and I'll send a link to you in the chat below for where you can find more of their songs as well. It's absolutely wonderful. This is what's happening now. They're actually getting the bricks to bring so that they can build their studio. So it's going to be a mud brick, water collecting, solar powered music studio. And this music studio we put in an application in collaboration with the Abundant Earth Foundation to the Rex Foundation, which is actually the foundation set up by the Grateful Dead. And they were so thrilled to be able to offer them the funds to build this studio and get access to a piece of land, build their studio and get the equipment they need to kit out their own space. So this is going to be a centre where young people can come and be mentored in having a voice. And what happens when they have a voice is new opportunities arise. And we hope that through this too, that the music of permaculture will be able to spread and be communicated throughout not only this camp, but more camps as well. And it's already spreading. So the Rex Foundation was so excited about this project that they said, look, normally we only fund one type of project once. They've already committed funds to build a Permayouth music studio in Pine Ridge Reservation, the Indian reservation in the middle of America, and they're talking about other studios in other places too. We're looking at creating an album of Permayouth music from around the world, and just really getting a voice for these, a platform where these young people can have a much greater voice, and that permaculture and Permayouth can also find a greater voice. So the refugee network is starting to expand throughout East Africa. And one of the people that's really been central to this, as well as Sakina, is Moriki. And Moriki is someone who I've been working with as well, just about every day. I offered him a scholarship to attend the Permaculture Educators Program, and he started that course, and very soon after he started it, he started sharing it back with Permayouth. He started a Permayouth club. He started bringing Permayouth to the meetings, to the festivals, to contributing films. So he has a YouTube channel now with so many films of like all the different things that are happening in their camps, and it's so inspiring. But the story about what Moriki's doing is even way more inspiring than that. So, but he began doing work with home gardens, getting young people the access, like Sakina, to the skills, the tools, and the micro-enterprise skills to be able to set up these gardens around their home so that access to good food, and making films about that can then be shared to other camps. And I think this has been the key of the success of the work that he's done, because people are starting to notice his work in other camps and asking for him to help. He also did an amazing service to young people throughout the lockdown of offering classes, permaculture classes, and actually the young people getting their globally recognised permaculture design certificate courses while lockdown was on and schools were closed. And this, he told me, was an incredibly important part for the mental health and well-being of young people. Not only that they were kept active, but they were kept safe. You know, a lot of young people ended up in a lot of trouble during the lockdown. There's drugs that are rife, there's violence, rapes, abuse, a whole lot of things that are just unimaginable pain that young people go through. So these programs had a whole other side, which, you know, when we talk about eco-humanitarianism, helps to bring that into perspective. So now what's going on is that Moriki has been asked to go and lead courses in other camps too. So what we're doing is we're sponsoring Moriki to travel to another refugee camp and take with him a teacher from another camp. And so what happens as he's moving around the camp, he has apprentices coming with him, or people who are able to then go back to their camp and prepare for a course, so that when Moriki arrives there, they're ready. They know what's going to happen. They know what the course is about. And then they get a chance to do a second course, so then they can be teachers and carry on the work in their community. And he's also now connecting all of those people too through an online network, through WhatsApp, and he's training people on WhatsApp and Zoom. But this Changemakers program is a really interesting one. It's including the permaculture design course. It's looking at thinking skills, the practical skills, and also the micro-enterprise skills. So they're learning a whole range of different things from soap making to mushroom production that can be a really good form of income generation and start to turn things around. But this Changemakers course is about helping young people to step up as leaders in their community. And these leaders come in all shapes and sizes. There's some really young kids who are involved in this, and there's people like James, who is an extraordinary young man who we've just met recently in a refugee settlement in Orichinga. And he's an extraordinary artist and singer. So we're very excited about him starting to collaborate on posters and booklets about permaculture that can be then shared further. But as well as the classroom work and the theory work and the discussions and the connections, there is also a lot of practical work that's going on. So when the young people get together, they're learning about community composting, they're building composting systems, they're collecting resources from around their community, learning how to construct these. They're learning about seed saving and finding ways to actually make their own pots that aren't relying on plastic. So there's bamboo and there's paper. The thing about seed saving there is it's challenging because of the Green Revolution and the fact that the governments have actually made it very difficult for local people to exchange and sell local seeds, in some places illegal. So what's happening is starting to bring back some local seeds that can be saved year after year instead of having to buy them and then also all the associated chemicals. So there's been donations of seed, there's been local networking around seeds, and then the young people are learning about how they can do this and to set up their education farm as a seed farm, so that then every time Moriki or someone else is going out from that farm to another community, they take with them bags of seed that then he teaches them how to do the seed saving and to set up their seed farm, so then they can take it out further. So this whole idea is that this work just keeps rippling out. So the work that we do with the Permaculture Education Institute and Ethos Foundation and Permayouth is just kind of helping to seed this. And from there, they take it and go. And also things like this. The Permayouth, when they do festivals, what they do is they're free. Everything's in the gift economy with Permayouth, but they ask for donations for coming along to the events. And when they raise enough money, they'll send it to Moriki or to Sakina, and they'll find some way to support either another class of children to go through a program or to buy resources that will help them do micro-enterprises. So at one time, they bought a sewing machine. We're just about to try and find a way to get more funds, to get more sewing machines, to get this sewing collective happening to make clothes for celebrations, clothes for the garden, and clothes for school kids to go to school, and also doing repairs. And so part of this is setting up a cooperative and setting up a saving club so that they're learning how to create resilient enterprises. And these sewing machines are the old style treadle ones. So we're going to get some electric ones if they've got solar power, but also have the treadle ones so they're not dependent on the power being on or off, which is so unreliable there. So even this, so it's extending out, from the seeds to the sewing machines, and even into filmmaking. So it's finding like what are Somali with his music. That was his passion. That's his gift, and that's where he shines. And we're meeting young people who are shining in so many different ways. James with his artwork and his music. Josie Ann loves photography and filmmaking, and so she's now supported to be the photographer and the filmmaker that works when they're at the Nakavali. Actually, she's not at Nakavali. She's in Ramwanja, at the Ramwanja refugee settlement. Excuse me, I've got the wrong settlement there. And so her work is, she's now able to do the permaculture work in something that she really loves, giving her a skill and a platform to be able to have a voice as well. And through this work, what Moriki does is he finds out who are the most vulnerable communities in the refugee settlement, and then find ways to support them. At one point, he was invited into the office of Prime Minister. Well, actually called in, and he was a bit worried, and he because he had this farm, and as a refugee, you're not meant to own land, and he hadn't quite finished becoming an NGO, so he is now, and that's all okay. But he was called in. And they said, "So why is it that you only do this work for refugees? What about the host community? They need it too." And so he set up a program for women that connected women from camp with the women from the host community. And one of the things they said was it was one of the most powerful things that they'd done. None of them had ever knew each other before and were afraid of each other. Then the next program was this one, the foster care program. So he talked to the UN and said, look, who are the people who are taking in the orphans and who are struggling the most and who need the support? So he set up a program. He had, I think it was almost 100 people who had applied for this program, and he could only take, I think, around 30 because of the COVID restrictions. And so the first of these foster care programs took place. And each of these programs, I ought to say, is that we send funds for Moriki to run the program. So money for him to run it, money for food to feed people worldwide, the program, money for tools and seeds and teaching resources and practical things and practical resources, the training on the ground, and maybe also setting up a farm that can be left with that group. So we send money to each of those, and it ends up being around about $100, $150 per person. And then if we add on, a bit of extra micro enterprise training, it might be around about $200 per person. And this way, Moriki is able to have the security of knowing he can go out and he can organise all this training and offer it for free throughout the communities, and then it can ripple on. And also part of what we're doing too is at the end of each course, trying to find out a way to support the setting up, the seeding of these micro enterprise programs that they're running. So anyway, this is Esperance, and she was one of the foster carer women, an elderly woman, and through this program, they built her a new oven in her house, which is a mud oven that's a rocket stove, which takes the black smoke out of her little hut, but also means that she doesn't have to go and walk so far to collect as much wood because it's so much more efficient. So they identified who was the most needing of this support, and they built it there. Now, what's happened as a result of that is that other people have asked those young men who built it if they could get it at their place. And so now that started a micro enterprise for them. So all of these things, it's about serving people who need it the most, but then finding ways to carry on that work in a sustainable way. So the part of this too is about supporting as many people as possible to become permaculture teachers throughout East African refugee camps. Moriki talks about, he doesn't want to have a whole lot of followers. He wants to go out and teach more leaders who can go out and do this work. And one of the people who is becoming a magnificent young leader is the Permayouth graduate, Roland. Now, Roland is 18 years old. She's a refugee from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and she's one of the people we've been supporting to be an apprentice to Moriki, to travel around with him to go and teach and build up her experience so that she can then go and independently feel confident to run her own programs. So part of our work and supporting too is helping her to travel and to get food and accommodation and travel and to be there as a supportive teacher. One of the things that she's doing while she's going around is she's sending back reports. So she'll make films about what's happening in the communities. She's writing up stories about people like Esperance and telling us what's going on. So she'll go and meet with them and sit with them and talk with them. So her work is absolutely magnificent. And she's also doing music now too. So there's this music collaboration that's happening with a number of different camps in Uganda. There's the Kiyaka 2 refugee settlement. Roland herself is from Nakivale refugee settlement. And then Moriki, who's helped to coordinate these, is from Ramwanja. So I want to share with you the song that is from Roland's music.
Maji machafu tusinywe tena, misitu tusiende tena. Permaculture imeleta njia fupi kwa kurahisisha maisha, kama vile kutengeneza makala na mengi tumeyajua. Permaculture imetufundisha tukipanda mboga tusiweke kemikali, afya zetu ziwe sawa, mboga tusiweke dawa, mazingira yawe sawa, salama. Angalia watoto wanatumia mboga, pia maji masafi, afya zao ni nzuri. Thank you Permaculture kuleta mambo mapya hapa kwetu Chaka, tunashukuru. We say thank you Permaculture, we say thank you. God bless you Permaculture, we love you. You've made our life so easy. Now we're doing pure wood. We using the comedy Chako. Vegetables our food.
Millions of lives are endangered because of the waste that we produce every day. Hundreds of children are dying of cholera brought by these wastes. But we get a clean environment, care for our nature by reusing and recycling all the waste into new materials. We clean our towns, villages and homes, and we make life cooler every day because of permaculture. Permaculture is the hope of the humanity. It's the way that leads us to a better future.
Permaculture makara yawe turayashima, na muntu kijya mw'ishyamba gushaka inkwi, wadufashije kugabanya ihungabana ry'ikirere, turacana iwacu twatandukanye n'imyotsi. Urubyiruko narwo reka tugushime, twahuguwe byinshi Chaka turashima, waduhaye aho twidagadurira, tubona ibyo gukora nidufite umwanya wo guta.
We say thank you Permaculture, we say thank you. God bless you Permaculture, we love you.
You've made our life so easy. Now we're doing pure wood. We using the comedy Chako. Vegetables our food.
We send our sincere thanks to the Permaculture Education Institute, Permayouth, Morag Gamble, teacher Moriki, who teaches permaculture in East African refugee camps.
Roland Asima.
We say thank you Permaculture, we say thank you. God bless you Permaculture, we love you.
You've made our life so easy. Now we're doing pure wood. We using the comedy Chako. Vegetables our food.
So it's fantastic, isn't it? I mean, it's just extraordinary, the kind of things that are coming out from the settlements and the quality of this. And with just a little bit of extra support, what amazing things they could do. Also, what Roland is doing is she's starting to write. She has a passion for writing. So we're now trying to find ways to support her to get these little books printed. So she's writing up books. She's finding local illustrators to tell permaculture stories that can be shared with young people to get the knowledge. So in this little book that she's written, a PDF, you can see She's talking about all the different things that are how to start a kitchen garden. And then she's going to hand those out and go and read them in communities and get them translated into local languages as well. So outside of the refugee settlements is one of the programs that was one of the original programs that Ethos Foundation was supporting in East Africa. And this is the Women's Farm. It was actually one of the programs that we were able to visit when we were there pre-COVID. And so Jane, who's standing next to me, is the leader of this women's self-help group. And she coordinates women from around her region to come together to find ways to help each other. And one of the main things that we were able to do last year was for them to buy a piece of land that is their community farm. And then on this farm, they're growing food for their families and growing food to sell, which is then enabling them to be able to send their children to school and to buy medicines that they need. They're also going out, and we've just sent some funds so they can travel to a few other farms to go and see what's happening with permaculture in their region and bring back that knowledge. We're also supporting them to go out and do little outreach workshops in villages around their area so that they can then help encourage other people to do this kind of permaculture work too, which means that they have better water absorption, better water management, seed saving, diversification of foods, not using chemicals, all of these different things. And so it's these very practical skills that they're going out and sharing, women's group to women's group, farmers group to farmers group. And also in that region of Western Kenya, it's actually the very first program that connected me with this work, in fact, was Jennifer. Jennifer's on the right. And this is Jennifer and Caroline, and we were able to sponsor both Jennifer and Caroline to come and do that permaculture course, the one that we were able to get to do pre-COVID time. And so they've now come back into their villages and they are running permaculture courses. They do them particularly for girls, but one of their key focuses too is on creating washable sanitary pads. And so Jennifer is actually a seamstress as well as a permaculture teacher. And so she had gathered up all these different resources, scraps of fabric and materials to make up these kits. And so she would take them and deliver them to classes of girls. So they would have a set of panties, a set of soap, a set of washable pads, and this bag to keep them safe in. Because the thing is that unless you have pads, you're not allowed to go to school. And to buy the commercial pads is expensive. And so what they would be doing was using one pad all day, which is unsanitary. And also what they were doing is, things would happen which would mean that they would, do favors for the shopkeeper so that they could get more pads and then end up in, early pregnancy or with STDs. And I think what struck me most about this when Jennifer first approached me was that, I take so much for granted. When I have a period, then I can just take care of that. It's not an issue of the future of my life or of illness and abuse, that it just is. It's just something that I can take care of easily every month. So what's happening now is when Jennifer takes these kits, she then does a class around health and nutrition and girls' rights and permaculture. And so she's now also teaching permaculture classes to the mothers and to the teachers and to girls around the area to support more of this permaculture work to happen. This is a picture I just got as well today. Jennifer and Caroline are right now teaching this PDC, the Permaculture Design Certificate course for women to learn practical skills for making a difference in their community and to support young girls as well. So they'll be getting a group of people to make more pads, to go out into more schools to teach more young people about permaculture and to help them to set up permaculture gardens in their own communities. So, this again just keeps rippling out, and it's just relationship by relationship and slowly. But what happens is that when you start to work with someone like Jennifer or like Jane or Sakina or Moriki or Roland or Somali, that the relationship deepens. And when they start to recommend that, yes, I think this program works, then we know. And so what we do is when we gather funds from various sources, and mostly it's through people like yourselves who donate directly to the Ethos Foundation, we send 100% to these communities. And we know that it's going to go to the right place and be used in the right way, because we're partners in this process. And what we also notice too is that the people care side of this is so important. And this is, I guess, part of that eco-humanitarianism as well. And we realised we were starting to get requests for supporting the daughters of permaculture teachers, or if someone had was really sick. And, what we realised was that people won't be able to go and be effective permaculture educators or get their farm up and running or ripple out the work that they're doing that they want to do if they're struggling just to get to square one with getting their child to school or addressing a medical crisis. So we also have developed up a fund that supports young girls who are part of this program to actually access education. So Faith is deaf, and so she's gone to a special school that gives her an education, a vocational education. That means that she'll be able to not just sit at home and do nothing. Similarly, the girl on the left, on the right, is the daughter of a disabled parent who finds it more challenging to get ahead, and so we supported her. And also then there's other types of things that happen. So this is Dany, who's in the back, you can see, and he's one of Moriki's students who's based in a refugee settlement in Tanzania, where Moriki will be going to once the COVID lockdown of Uganda has finished. And so he has Permayouth clubs starting to form that are meeting up regularly to do permaculture classes. And one of the things he identified was that, it needs to be more sport and recreation and fun. And so he asked me whether I would support getting a Permayouth girls soccer team. And I thought it was just such a fabulous idea. And so they went and got themselves some jerseys and a soccer ball, and now they have their team and they're going out starting to do soccer training and soccer games in the region. So, permaculture is not just the garden, it's so many other things as well. And really it's helping to address this reality. I mean, this is what life is like in the refugee settlement. It's the transformation that needs to take place is profound. And this work that we're doing is only just scratching the surface. And what we're hoping is that each one of those young people who gets fired up by this permaculture training has the capacity to go and fire up more people, who then go and fire up more people. So we are at this point where the Permayouth and the permaculture programs are rapidly expanding, and we're really needing a lot more support. And each time the Permayouth Festival comes around, there's people from around the world who come and join in, who get to share and present and hear and exchange, and young people from all around are getting to talk with young people from all around. And it's just extraordinary. We had one last night, actually, and Artist's family joined us. This is the one when Rosemary joined us, as well as one of the first songs from the refugee settlements and stories from Moriki's Permayouth, and Sierra Robinson, who's a young TEDx speaker and Earth Guardian permaculture advocate, as well as the local Permayouth team from here in Australia. And so they get on and they chat by Zoom, and you can see there's Somali with a big smile on, sitting next to Costa, and Tommy from North Uganda, who won the Youth in Permaculture, one of the Youth in Permaculture prizes. And actually, the Permayouth did win one of the Youth in Permaculture prizes too, which is extraordinary, and have just been shortlisted for the Lush Spring Prize. And, people support Permayouth in so many different ways. Some people are donating funds through the festivals. Other people like Billy, who is Eve Ballard, who is in this picture below Somali there. She's a resident slam poet. This is her older sister who struggles with a number of disabilities. And when she was younger, to stop her, she was picking because she had busy hands. Her mum taught her how to crochet. And so she crochets these beautiful blankets and then has donated a number of them to the Permayouth to raffle off. And it's helped to raise, thousands of dollars, which we've sent to the refugee settlement. We've just finished raffling off one, which is amazingly, Chris Carroll from the Perma Fund won this. And, I think that's so wonderful because she's done so much volunteer work for the Permaculture Perma Fund for a very long time. So Billy's kind of a model of people, I think, who are saying, well, it doesn't matter who you are or what your challenges are, that you can actually make a difference with the skills that you have. And I just want to say a huge thanks and shout out to Billy because she's just so extraordinary and she's had an enormously tough year this year. So there's also many emerging Permayouth programs that are happening too. And one of these, we've just come back from the rainforest communities up in far north Queensland, where there's an emergent group forming at the local primary school, connecting the elders from the Jumbung community with that local school. So we're kind of just slowly taking steps with that. And there are new groups forming all around the world. So in the Americas, in the Philippines, in Europe, UK, very, very many places throughout Africa and Australia. And so if you'd like to find out ways to get started, you can check out permayouth.org. And so this is an ongoing communication that we're having with Permayouth and elders in communities in many parts of the world. And it's an exciting work that's happening. And it really does need more people who are able to jump in and apply a permaculture lens in a whole systems way to humanitarian work as eco-humanitarianism. And I really do encourage, as I said before, to listen, but also to speak up loudly and to act on this knowledge, not just to hold it and know it, but to act on this and to share this knowledge, but also to share what you have as a capacity to do something, like what Billy is able to do. She shares her blankets to be able to raise funds. So I encourage you to learn as much as you can about this situation of what's going on, to contribute what you can to support the work that's happening, whether that be through sponsoring or donations or collaborations. Maybe the work that you do, you might be able to tithe, 1%, 10% to this kind of work. In my work, I've decided that I'm tithing 50% of the work that I do to supporting the work, eco-humanitarianism work. And actually, it's probably a lot more than that, but that's kind of what I've declared to do. And so whatever you're capable of doing, whether it be in the gift economy, by donating funds, and really what I've realised, particularly with the refugee settlements, it's not so much sending stuff, it's sending resources, meaning money, to be able to access the things they need there, to be able to get on and do things, and not to go in and take over and determine what's happening. It's really just having a leg up to be able to get started. And, when we think about when we're getting a community garden started, say, in Australia, for example, we often apply for a grant to get the money, to get the tools and the seeds, and it's the same thing. But there are no grant agencies there to easily access money to do permaculture work. That's where it comes down to organisations like the Ethos Foundation. So we get requests from many different parts. But what I'm trying to encourage people to do is to talk either through, say, Moriki or Sakina. And so we have this relational approach, which means that we build in trust and connectivity and community of practice. And that once some of the funds have been spent and a program has been developed, they stay connected. And so the work that Moriki is doing now is he's actually running online courses, as I said before, so that all the programs from Kitgum, Ramwanja, Kiaka in the city in Wakiso, across to Sakina, they're all talking. And this is essential because they all hold parts of the knowledge and together they become more visible and also are able to then feel like they're, when we're talking with different groups outside, that there's something quite profound that's happening here. and a recognition that it does need support. We've got so many collaborations. I don't think necessarily we have, I've managed to list them all here, but so the key thing is that with the Permaculture Education Institute, we offer scholarships to people in refugee settlements so that they can get the basis of the information of the in-depth permaculture education training. So if they have access to English and a computer, and sometimes we're able to support them with that, if there's someone who has that capacity, we then encourage them to teach other people in their local language. And so that's where the Ethos Foundation and the Permayouth come in to actually run these programs and ripple them out. And so we've collaborated with the International Bateson Institute, with Nora Bateson and Warm Data, with Realliance, Permaculture Magazine, Permaculture Australia, the Perma Fund, Leaf Global Arts and the Abundant Earth Foundation and Rex Foundation have been collaborating with the music studios. Lush Spring Prize were shortlisted, so fingers crossed for that. Club of Rome is connected with the International Bateson Institute and the Warm Data and the programs happening there. And of course, becoming a hub for permaculture for refugees, which is the organisation led by Rosemary Morrow and cohorts. And then the Global Eco Village Network, particularly here in Australia, we're doing the work with Indigenous communities, but also connecting in with the Global Eco Village Network around the world to look at how we can support as well. So I'm an ambassador of the Eco Village Network as well as a global permaculture ambassador. So as I mentioned, 100% of donations that anyone sends to this work, when I receive them, they only touch the bottom of the bank account for a very short period of time before they're sent straight back off across to a project that needs it. I have always got at least 20 projects on my desk that I often feel quite anxious that I don't have the funds to support. So if you're able to support, like $10, $50, $100, $1,000, $10,000, it doesn't matter what scale, we can take that and send 100% and make sure that it goes to the community at the scale that's needed, and do amazing work with this. So we are a registered charity. We don't have deductible gift status yet. I'm hoping to work towards that. And I do encourage people to think about not just a one-off donation, even though we welcome anything, but perhaps, you could make this a monthly donation. We know that when we have the monthly donations, we can guarantee that, yes, I can plan ahead. Yes, I can say yes to a project because I know I've got some money coming in. I can just keep it flowing. So if that is something that's possible to you, I absolutely honour and thank you for that. And if you can't, also, I'm just glad that you're here and listening to this, and maybe there's someone that you can tell about the work that we're doing so that who may have the capacity to do this. And if you're someone who's watching this who is in a refugee settlement and who is desperately wanting to get on board with this, please get in touch. I would love to hear from you, and know that this is a long-term relationship that we form, and it's something that is really based on the trust and mutual respect and communication flow, so that we can really know that we have this sort of partnership approach, and that seems to, for me, it makes this all work. And also, if you can't donate money, but you can donate time in terms of writing up the stories that come in, or sharing on social media the types of stories to then help get more support, or helping being someone who can design and keep a website updated. There are so many things that we need in terms of the wish list of supporters. So yeah, please get in touch if this has at all moved you to step forward. So the key thing that I think that's a foundation of all of this is myceliating the network of education for educators. And so this has all come really from this foundation of the Permaculture Educators Program. People who have the capacity and the skills to understand what this is about and how to share it forward. So I welcome you to join this network. There is a course that I run. It's called the Permaculture Educators Program, which combines a permaculture design certificate course, a permaculture teacher certificate course, and also some business modules. And throughout that too, it's a self-paced course that you can start any time and take as long as you need. There's no expiry dates or due dates. And like I said, there's many people who are part of this program from all around the world, 6 continents. And so there's lots of conversations that happen around this. And we have groups and discussions that we can give attention and focus to this work too. So if you want to find out more about that, check out the Permaculture Education Institute.org. It is a paid course, and I really encourage you to jump on board with this if this is something you feel is that you'd like to spend your time doing, whether that be part-time or full-time, whether this be something that you do around your other work or it's something that you do as a part-time work or even as a community service work. You know, the skills that we get and the connections that we make inside this course and this community of practice are life-changing, transformative, and totally uplifting. You know, I wake up every day with a beautiful smile on my face because of, you know, overnight all this news of wonderful new programs and work and ideas that I get from people everywhere. You know, it doesn't matter whether they're in New York or Geneva or Rwanda refugee settlement. The work that people are doing through this is just absolutely astounding. So thank you for being here and for listening. These again are the links. So there's the Permaculture Education Institute.org. There's Our Permaculture Life, which is where you'll find my YouTube and my blog, podcast, and also a practical permaculture course, which is actually all these kind of modules. The Ethos Foundation, where there's a portal to donate, which is the ethosfoundation.org.au. The website is currently in process of being updated, so please excuse me if it doesn't look the most professional that you would expect. As I said, I do need some volunteers to help with that. And then there's also the Permayouth. So if you have young people who you would like to get involved in this that you know of, I encourage you to let them know about this program too. It's not a program as like something you can go and deliver at a school. It's actually a community of young people learning together. So they come in and they say, oh, I'd like to learn about this, and they'll find the information and then share it. And so it's a really self-directed learning community. They are working on developing up some resources and some posters and a little online course as well. But it's not something to just have delivered. It's about being an active participant and engaging in this process of positive and practical change, and in a meaningful way. And as you can see, you know, the Permayouth, so, you know, they're like between 11 to 15, the main group that have been involved in driving this, have been responsible for profound change and profound support for communities around the world. And, you know, all of the people who've become involved in that have contributed to that, enriched the lives of everybody. So, again, thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to stick around. If you're watching this live, I'm going to stick around now, and feel free to ask questions. I'll see if I can pop in some more links in the chat as well for you. My email to get in touch is morag@permacultureeducationinstitute.org, and I welcome you to email me. And please, you know, join the Permaculture Education Institute. Support the Ethos Foundation and get your young people involved in Permayouth. Thank you so much for being here today. It's been my pleasure to have your company. Take care.